Okay, so I would like to quiz you on that. That's part of media. Is media an actor in the discourse, in the larger discourse?
Yes.
Okay, where is it fitting in the? If we go back here, where does media fit? Narrative or metaphysical paradigm?
It should come in all of them, right? Because that's
Yeah.
what usually tells us what's right, what's wrong, and then
Yeah.
makes us things for us.
Yeah. So it actually is part of all. In fact, I would say policy not much, but definitely narrative is the most dominant where newspaper strikes. Newspapers, media influence your day-to-day thinking, right? It's not just about information, it's about how do you frame questions about solution, right? So I'm going to give one example. Let's say there was a murder which took place in a XYZ location. The one part of the thought process will be the newspaper saying that alleged murder has happened and X is the accused and maybe he has committed the crime. Another newspaper may say murder did not take place, there was no crime, it's just an accident, right? So it actually depends which newspaper you're consuming to see that there are different shades to the truth, that there is not one definition of truth, there are multiple versions of truth. So you have to be able to intelligently identify what is the truth by reading and understanding and asking yourself these questions, you know. So you have to really ask yourself these questions to actually identify how stakeholders are not only misleading or maybe misdirecting or talking about things which don't exist. So these mediums are very powerful, by the way. They work as very consolidated institutions. They can drive change and they can reduce or they can minimize change. So it's up to you as critical thinkers to identify that.
You would even say like what happened to Cobra 61. There was a sting operation by Cobra on a news article, like a newspaper like that, which tried to bring to light like how these media enterprises were taking money from political parties
Right.
to put their own ideology up front. Like after the thing was published, many news agencies suddenly put out a completely different topic into like a new, completely fabricated a new topic and put it out to the general public to record.
Yeah. To actually mislead them.
Yeah.
So today, I think yesterday, some activists were arrested from certain universities. I've not read the newspaper properly. And then at the same time, some of there are institutions which have been accused of violence. The media plays a strong cover-up role also, many times, how it functions in society. It informs as well as misinforms people. So it's up to the critical thinkers to actually identify the right set of questions as to what is a fact, if there exists a fact. So that is what we are looking at. So again, going back to the question, discourse hegemony. What is a discourse hegemony? So you've put a lot of interesting questions. I'm sorry for forgetting your name. Vishal. What Vishal is talking about, Cobra Post and the cover-up, is basically a discourse hegemony. That there is one strong discourse happening every time in India. It could be around Modi, it could be around Rahul Gandhi, it could be around Dalits, beef lynching, it could be around whatever it's happening in the society. There is a dominant discourse which is taking place. Whoever controls that controls the will of the people and controls the politics. So if your discourse, let's say if Vishal wants to point out that Kazim has XYZ nature in his personality or his English is very poor, then Vishal will go all out to actually put out content on the media, write about it, push the research community, push all the stakeholders to communicate so much that people will start believing it, right? Even if it's false. So a lie said many times again and again, you may have heard that becomes the truth. Well, actually it happens. And it happens on a daily basis. It happens and it has resulted into something called a fake news menace, which I'm not going to address here because that's not my lecture for today, but definitely it's being peddled out because the rulers don't rule just by sitting on the throne. They rule by controlling the discourse. They rule by controlling where the discussions will go and who will read and what I want you to believe. So that I will push that content out, and that's why Republic was given birth, by the way. And that's why a lot of other news channels who are funded by those agencies or those institutions drive that particular narrative. So they're all working in tandem and they're all working in a society where some interest parties want to drive one particular discourse, others want to drive a particular kind of or different kind of discourse, and some want to be neutral. So again, it's up to us to actually understand how that works, because to actually bring transformative change over here, you have to have discourse hegemony. Otherwise, people will not buy your idea if they don't understand your idea, and they will only understand your idea if their mind space are open to listening to you, and that will only happen when you can control some of their mind space by telling them what concept you want to talk about. So it's driven by three actors primarily: political, social and economic. Political actors, of course, the political parties which get elected, they keep giving their lectures, public meetings, bhashans, all those things. So they are, sounding out things in your ears. Then it's a social discourse which is happening around rights, around marginalized groups, around Dalits, around entities which are being targeted. So there is a very strong social discourse around it, as well as people who want to drive change, poverty reduction, alleviation, very positive, very, very sort of transformational by nature, which is very sort of driven by people's ideologies. And then the economic discourse, which is cutthroat economics, jobs, growth, development, how much per capita GDP India is getting, what is the GDP growth about. And that is a larger discourse which sometimes dominates even the political and social discourse. And this is why Modi was elected. He was able to dominate the economic discourse in 2014, that he promised people that I'll give you jobs, I'll give you 15 lakhs in your account, I'll get you XYZ. And he was elected because people thought he will bring development. A lot of that has happened, a lot of that may not have happened. We're not here to critique or evaluate that. But definitely his control over the economic discourse enabled him to win the election. So if you have a hegemony over one of these actors, and if you control one of these actors, then you are in strong consolidation of power, and that's how power is pretty much flowing. Any clarifications? Yeah, good. So we are in a system where change is slow. We are in a system where evolution takes place rather than revolution, and which is good. We don't want revolution every day, because then it will end up as evolution. Something which happens every day or on a regular basis is evolutionary. So revolution cannot happen every day unless you are changing the meaning of evolution. And then we are also living in a society where people are not, they don't want to change. They don't want to live sort of very transformational lives. So how do you bring paradigm shift? And what is a paradigm shift? Can anybody give me an idea of, you must have heard this term. There's a paradigm shift in the way machinery is working or people are working. What exactly is a paradigm shift?
It's a change in ideology of what's possible in nature, like shifting of the ideology of the entire group
Mm-hmm.
in a certain scale,
Change in discourse maybe.
Mhm.
Like for example, if you see freedom struggle, the course of the whole struggle changed when Gandhi entered. So it rather than being centric towards political leaders, it became more deep-rooted.
Right.
Grassroots people got involved.
Yeah.
So that was a paradigm shift in the struggle to attain freedom. So that could be.
Yeah, so 1857 was a paradigm shift. Something which is crazy in nature. Like even in your life, I'm sure you guys must have had, whenever you guys lost your virginity was a paradigm shift. or whenever you guys went to college, first time night out, paradigm shift, or giving your first lecture. So extremely new ideas, practices coming out, and that enabling a change in the status quo about yourself, about a community, about a country. That is a paradigm shift. So over here we've sort of identified that it is transcending in nature. Paradigm shift, if you have to shift a paradigm, which is basically going back here. So over here, if you look at paradigm discourse, which is the second level, which is to see how do you enhance startups in India, how do you remove poverty, how do you trigger a change in the way houses are built. That is a paradigm shift. A narrative is that I want more startups. How do you do it is a paradigm. So you bring a lot of startups, that's a paradigm shift. And how do you do that? You transcend the existing thought process. So as policymakers, you have to transcend the existing policies, right? Whatever is currently being put in place has to be evolutionized, has to be evolved into something bigger, better, more far-fetching, right? That's the first thing. Second is shifting the imagination of what is possible. So maybe 10 years ago, somebody told me that, yeah, you can't have green energy because it's just not possible. Well, now it is. So you shift the imagination of what 15 years ago was thought not possible, or maybe in 1857 it wasn't thought it would be easy for India to attain independence. Well, 90 years later, we were an independent country. So you are shifting the imagination of what is possible. Today, you may not believe or agree with me that you guys will be founders of law firms or policy think tanks, but the moment you actually work towards that idea, there is a paradigm shift in your thought process, right? So that's the second thing. Third is shifting expectations about the future. So what do we mean by shifting expectations about the future? Right now, you may think that I'm worried about my marks. India is looking at 8%, 7% growth. If I were to say, let's aim at 20%, right? So if I'm saying let's aim at 20%, I am driving a paradigm discourse over here that I want to have a 20% growth rather than an 8% growth. So my policies will then reflect that, because they will have to. That's the foundation I've laid to myself. In the same manner that I want to bring in 99% of my electricity should be green energy, right? That's a paradigm shift I'm trying to make. So my policies have to be that you create local corridors for green manufacturing, you bring in more technology, you train more people. So there has to be a change in the expectations about how the future will pan out. And after that, we go to the shifting calculations of risk versus opportunity. And this is a risk, and this is a challenge which we have to face is, okay, fine, you want 99% electricity to be green, but it's not possible because you don't have enough technology. That's a risk. Opportunity, well, if I do have green energy, then a lot of my debts owing to pollution will go down, which means my expenses, medical expenses will go down. So that's an opportunity. So risk versus opportunity, you scale those and then you arrive at a policy. And the final point is redefining interest, and which paved the way for new ideas. So as policymakers, as lawyers, as change agents, or as leaders, we always have to shift paradigms every now and then. If we live with the same objectives and the same thoughts, not only are we moving evolutionary and not revolutionary or not transformative, we are also not being able to drive a strong narrative discourse. It's good to be consistent, it's important to be steady, but every now and then as leaders, you have to sometimes change the discourse. Now, when I say that, I also mean that change it for the good. So before my lecture I started, I did mention that you guys should have a very clear understanding of what is right and what is wrong, because you don't want a system where you have transformation but you elect Trump, right? You don't want that. Trump's election is a transformative change as well. It's a paradigm shift, but for the bad. I mean, at least I would think so. I don't know how many of you would disagree, but so we have to be careful about it. We do want change, but what kind of change are we looking at? So that is your shifting calculations part of risk versus opportunity. Huge risk. I don't know where the opportunities are. Anyway, So once we sort of go into the whole paradigm shifting, the next process is to build a discourse alliance around that paradigm shift, right? So as policymakers, today let's assume we are in the government. We have agreed that we want India to be the next global superpower. By 2050, we want India to be number one in GDP. That's my that's my narrative. My paradigm is I want 100% green energy, I want zero poverty, 100% employment, 100% literacy rate. That's my paradigm discourse. And then we work around policies. But to actually get to that point where I can deliver policies, how do I convince my stakeholders, right? And that is why we need a strong discourse alliance. And what do we mean by discourse alliance? If somebody could sort of give it a guess, give it a shot, some sort of a... What could it be?
Alliance.
Alliance, yeah, alliances.
Alliance would be getting people together.
Yep.
So discourse alliance would be
Discourse alliance towards your paradigm shift or towards your narrative
yeah.
would
So
be.
getting like-minded people to work in a certain direction. Like
Yeah.
like you were giving us an example about India against corruption. So
Mhm.
it was a shift. So we got like the country economy, like-minded people
Right.
against corruption. So discourse with alliance.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good example. Any other examples? So basically, what we're doing, as she rightly pointed out, is convincing all stakeholders that the paradigm shift that you're trying to bring is good for the country and is good for you. Now, not everybody will agree with you. Even if you want to remove poverty, not everybody will agree with you. Some of them will say, oh, it can't happen. Some of them will say, well, you're too ambitious. Some of them will say there are better problems to look at. But everybody may agree with you when I say that I want India to be a global superpower by 2050. Right? There are no disagreements there. So when I started my lecture, the idea was to find similar convergent points with your foes, with your adversaries, with people against you. Of course, those who are with you are with you, but those who are on the fence may also join you. But those who are opposing you, those who are against you, still finding some convergence with them and working with those convergence to find a common ground is all about building a discourse alliance. Once you do that, then your policy implementation becomes extremely smooth. I can give an example of why is Delhi government struggling with so many policy implementation is because the Delhi government and the center are not agreeing, are not really having a strong discourse alliance. They disagree on everything, almost everything. That's why you have so much back and forth and so much friction between the Chief Minister and the LG. The idea is that to be able to drive development and growth, to be able to deliver paradigm shift in policies, you need alliances. Because what we are seeing is governments fighting with each other, as I mentioned before, governments working in silos, which leads to very low rate of efficiency and productivity in the way we function as a society, which is why we are not growing at the pace we should grow. There is no other problem with the country. There is no dearth of skill, there is no dearth of money, there is a dearth of alliances, there is a dearth of commonalities, common grounds. And because people fight so much with each other, different interest groups fight so much, they fail to arrive at a convergence point. And when they don't do that, they can't implement policies. You can't have Delhi government, even if they may have some really cool ideas, they can't implement it without the support of the center. And because center has certain issues with the Delhi government which they don't want to change, Delhi as a city is struggling. That's why we see the air quality problems, we see the traffic problems, there are no local Wi-Fi hotspots. It's been 3 years. We were promised those things. So it's still the same place where it is. There is no dearth of policies, but alliances don't emerge, and then people stay where they are, which is status quo, which is what exists right now. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you really build a discourse alliance? First way is to analyze existing discourse communities for commonalities, which is what I've mentioned. Then look at utopian vantage points, new development paradigm. So what will be a utopian vantage point is between a coal guy and a green energy guy, that by 2100 there should be no pollution. or every society should be rich yet clean. That's a very utopian concept, that nobody goes hungry, nobody in the world dies hungry, earth is full of resources. That's very utopian, but you can get there. You can get there by forging the right alliances. The third is game changing structural drivers. Your economics, your trade, your jobs, your infrastructure, energy systems, all those structural drivers have to come together. So if you want to make a lasting impression and if you want to relieve people of poverty, you have to have the right technology, education, give them enough sustainable options to grow, jobs, etc. That has to fit in the right picture. And then new narrative around the structural drivers, which is telling stories in a different manner, that now we are evolving as a society, and then transforming the political platform, which is elections, which is what we do on a sort of a regular 5-year, 6-year process, is when we elect new governments. So these are pretty much ideas and methods which you guys could sort of use to analyze where a discourse is happening, where are the alliances in India, where are situations where there are no alliances also. So this is where you can actually sort of get a thorough understanding of. Any doubts? And this is based pretty much how systems work. You can relate it to any possible political ideology or process which happens today. Great. Okay, and finally, once we agree on an alliance, and once we have a paradigm shift idea, we should deliver projects, right? And that is what the dialogue is aiming to do, and that is what entrepreneurs aim to do, and that is what leaders are looking to do in the future. And I hope all of you can also deliver some of those projects. It's a brainstorm with stakeholders. Once you do that, you then sort of discuss with yourself and with your people whether the idea is a catalyst, whether it can scale, it can transform the society, whether it can create a powerful narrative, whether it can have a lot of supporters. Whatever the idea is, you guys gave a lot of cool ideas when I started. Is that idea going to remain as an idea? Yes. If yes, then what are the mechanisms? It has to be scalable. It has to buy in the political narrative. So you have to find answers to that idea. And once you do that, then you have to see whether you can implement the idea. Is it technically possible? Somebody told me, I think you were talking about medical equipments. Is it technically possible? It may not happen today, but tomorrow it could be. Is it commercially viable? Right? Is it politically sellable? Right? So if it is, which is great, and you should brainstorm with your community and with people opposing your ideas also, and then come up with a project which could be a sort of a project which you work towards, and then deliver that project once you're out of college. So that's what we are trying to do. When we started the dialogue, we wanted to drive a strong, constructive policy discourse. We thought it was doable, we thought it was scalable, technically viable, politically sellable, and we thought that we can promote this into the system, and which is what we are able to do to an extent. But while doing that, there are a lot of challenges which you will always face with only one community which is going to oppose your ideas, which is not going to be in your alliance, which will be opposing you, but you have to bring them into the alliance. So to your question is, when you asked me that question in the beginning, that how do we work with stakeholders, this is how you have to work with them. You have to find a convergence, and if you don't, you have to stretch to actually find something, and to be able to convince them that this is what is best for that country or for that particular society. This is why we don't have many leaders, is because leaders or people don't really stretch themselves into believing or doing something with others. And I think as prospective leaders of tomorrow, you guys should definitely look at coming up with some scalable thoughts and scalable ideas with a team with which you can implement those and take things forward.
I have a question. How is it like? How do you bring about getting people into your idea if they are the ones who are profiting from it? If let's just part of a group is profiting from so much out of
They
this.
are profiting from the status quo.
They're
right?
profiting from the
Mm.
fact that they are friends with the dictator and they're able to get it out for such a cheap rate and then sell it to the masses for a completely ridiculous price, more than what 1,000 times the actual amount they've gotten it for. How would you bring about getting those people into your thing?
You need to identify whether they will profit still from the change you're trying to make.
Yeah.
So you'll have to find convergence. Maybe they are benefiting from status quo. Maybe they will benefit more from a transformative change process. They don't know. So it's for you to identify that. As a leader, as a sort of a thought leader, intellectually, you have to come up with certain thoughts and tell them, look, I know it's good for you. So corruption, why do we have corruption? Everybody talks about corruption. But corruption exists because people benefit from it. There is a large chunk of society which is benefiting from corruption. But can one of you convince the corrupt that you can benefit more if you remove corruption? How come? It could be possible. It could be possible. Maybe. We haven't thought of that. Maybe we have to change and raise our expectations. Maybe we have to change the way we think about, again, as leaders, that's the job. You have to drive a thought process. So you have to feed the seed in their mind and tell them, look, I know you're damn corrupt and you're benefiting a lot from these regulations, but if you do this, then your income increases in the next 15 years by this much because of these reasons. And he will immediately jump ship and come to you and he'll join your alliance. And then you have one strong partner as a stakeholder. So those are the transformative ideas which has to flow through, which education institutions like yours and people like yours should focus on. And basis that, it all depends on how convincing you are in your communications to actually convince people about, maybe convince me that I need to stop dialogue and I can do something better, please do that, and I can be in your alliance, so definitely.
Sir, I had a question when you were talking about how we have to incentivize the corrupt people to give them the idea, plant a seed that will benefit more for the movement. And you rightly said in the previous prior to all this that India has an attitude of chalta hai, काम चल रहा है तो चलने देते हैं. So that idea of incentivizing the corrupt, isn't it like a far-fetched and an utopian idea?
Yeah.
How?
So I'll go back here, building a discourse alliances, right? So the second vantage, you see that vantage point we're talking about, a utopian. It has to be utopian. When people in 17th, 18th century or 19th century thought of independence, it was a utopian concept to them. At that time, at that moment, with the current situation prevalent, people would have been like, you can't even imagine. And in the 15th, 16th century, it was utopian for the Brits to come and rule us. In the same way that it was utopian for us to think, oh, there's no independence. So what is utopian today will be the reality tomorrow in the next 50, 60 years. In the same way that green technology was a utopian concept. Not now, 20 years ago it was not thought of that solar and wind can actually power 50% of a country's electricity demands. So we are continuously evolving our ideas into from utopian ideas. So when you look at this grid, you have metaphysical discourse, which is the utopian concept of what is good, what is bad. Then you go to the narrative. Once you're able to go to the second step, then you see that you can actually deliver it. So think of the very utopian ideas all of you have, everybody has, and then relate it to a narrative. It could be a digital narrative, it could be a political narrative, it could be a societal narrative. If I want a corrupt-free India, which is my metaphysical discourse, I will find a narrative which benefits the corrupt. Because otherwise there won't be any corruption-free India. The people who benefit want status quo to stay. But you are trying to transform the society as leaders. So what kind of paradigm shift, when we go back to paradigm shift and we're talking about paradigm shift here, so what kind of shift in terms of imagination, shift in terms of expectation about the future, and the risk versus opportunity. So you give your corrupt friend or whoever, person, that in the next 15 years you can make more money by being honest if you help me place the system in that particular order. So that's for you guys to brainstorm and come up with. And that's the job of policymakers, that's the job of lawyers, that's the job of intellectuals sitting right now and sitting in high offices in the next 5-10 years to come up with those ideas, because that's how the society will move forward. Any? Yeah. Kasim, yes.
Kasim, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. We learned a lot. I'm a politician, right? From Sri Lanka, and I work for the Sri Lanka Freedom Party as advisor, right? For the strategy committee. So in 2022, I have to contest election.
Okay.
So since you're a political analyst, advisor, looking at grassroots level, people have expectations in any village or town or something. How do we, as a policymaker or anyone, how do we increase our vote bank through that expectation? How do we, like, maybe in a brief way, you can say that, what are the systems that can be used to get that shift towards that aim?
So people have expectations, and let's say
have different
constituency. Everybody wants something. A community may want more milk, somebody may want better houses. So you have at least 10 to 15 different interests of communities coming out in your locality. What, as a starting point, you need to do with them is to brainstorm on 2 to 3 needs which are most common amongst everybody and focus on them to start with. If you want to increase or enhance your vote bank and reach out to the last mile voter, you have to connect with everybody. Now you may not give all needs or satisfy all needs of everyone, but satisfy at least 2 to 3 needs of everybody in different priorities.
If I just ask you another question. Let's say I don't have that much of money in my party or something to build houses and give an example of that I can do this. And I have a formidable opposition. How do I crack that, like, convince the crowd?
You have to play the emotional card. You have to play a utopian concept that if you are elected, that one thing which they want desperately will happen. As a society, as a village, you will transform. Again, you have to have a paradigm shift in the way they think. I'll go here in terms of shifting the imagination of what is possible. You have to feel this thought in their minds. Today they may not agree with you that if you tell that I will give everybody jobs, but you have to put that imagination in their minds and raise expectations so that once you get elected, you are supposed to do it. Of course, I hope you do that. Don't raise expectations so high that you can't deliver. I've seen enough in India, but you should raise it to a level where they emotionally connect with you. And of course, shifting expectation about the future. So make them feel good that the coming times are good. So the Modi government used it very well when they called about Achhe Din Aane Wale Hain, which meant that he shifted expectation about the future. That's what he did in his paradigm shift over there, that the future is bright. In the same way, you have to tell them that if you get elected, the future is much brighter. Their imagination will be, sort of met with, their expectations will be met, and the risk of electing you is the lowest amongst everybody else. Because you don't have money, so there is a lesser chance of corruption automatically. Because you don't have money, so you are a grassroots leader. Because you don't have money, so you are an honest young man wanting to make a difference. You are not here because of money. Others may be because they have the money and they want to equate it or they want to multiply it. In your case, you are a leader. That shows because you don't have money. And true leaders actually are the poorest. And you can trace back in history and you can identify that. So I think that is something which you can use in your constituency. And if you win, then I hope you implement some of the good policies.
Definitely agree.
That's a question. I'm not sure if this would work or not, but you could try selling them like their kids' future. Like how, if you are elected, like your party is elected, you can help better the education system, which could in future provide their kids with more better jobs in the international market. They would earn more, they would have better, like I'm sure everyone is more concerned about their kids at the end of the day than themselves. Like even if they don't agree to it, it's always kids. Like even people who don't have kids always see the young ones as something they would like to reflect on. Like give them something and not let them go through the same troubles that they've had. So it could work on.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, I didn't think of it. Very good idea. Thanks.
I just a question. Hello? I'm just like to add this point Shrimal was talking about. So it's something like that, the kind of conceptualizing of dream, right? Kind of strategic intervention, the way how to conceptualize people dream, isn't it?
Yep. That utopian
Yeah.
concept. Whatever everybody
So
has.
isn't it very postmodernist, like Foucault's conception, like postmodernist conception, like everything behind, like power is behind everything. Why we are sitting here? It's because of power. Why not other people are sitting here? So there are somehow it's either this ideology is driving this thing. Do you think? I'm not a little confused. And if something like after doing this conceptualization of dream, like after promising people, and maybe not promise, after doing everything as much as suppose Sriman can do, he could do and he did. And when people just blundered, and how much guarantee that this process or this strategy will actually work out?
So that's why it's a very high risk strategy. That if you are going and raising expectations and fueling a dream, which is needed for them to elect you, because a dream will be sold everywhere. He's selling a dream, his opponents are selling a dream. It depends on the constituent what kind of dream they are buying in. And many times after getting elected, dreams don't last, right? They end up in tatters. So as a responsible politician, it's your job to show them that, look, I will serve your dream, but I'm very pragmatic about what are the expectations I'm giving. And you should not give so high that you're not able to fulfill that dream. But at the same time, people are looking for dreams. And that's why the democratic process is there to support those dreams of people. Otherwise, we don't need a democracy. We can live with a ruler, he does his job, I come back to my place, I do my job and everything is there. A democracy is there because people can voice and opinionate their dreams and what they're really looking for. And once every few years, you'll have a revolution where you'll have a wave of a leader coming in and winning hearts and minds of people because people are just sick of the status quo. So don't end up as a status quo, but always be there to drive that paradigm shift.
Anyone? Any question? No.
Thank you.
It's done?
Yeah, it's
Oh my God, I was thinking like it's so interesting, I think it will continue.
I mean, I can continue talking, but it's 5:10.
Alright, thank you very much, Kazim.
Thanks a lot, Sachi. Thanks a
It's
lot.
wonderful and very informative and enriching topic, I think.
Thanks a lot.
And I feel like everyone liked it, and I would like to thank all of you. And we will be continuing this lecture series ahead, like another 10 weeks. So we suggest that this is an introductory session which started with introduction. It's all about introduction, but later on it will be a full-fledged module.
Yeah.
And so.
And we may do some of these workshops.
So we
will
have
have you guys brainstorm on narratives. Today was a lot of ideas, but you guys may not really understand how it functions in reality. So we'll do dedicated policy workshops, and it's good that most of you are from that background, so I can actually now take that up in the coming months.
And also, like our students have been working with dialogue, like they have been interning with dialogue. They have been working on a very interesting project
There are a few people they have their publications as well. So like we don't want bulk of people. We want actually a qualitative people, so that we have the qualitative work we can deliver. So if you're really interested, I suggest that you please register for next all classes whenever we'll send you the email, the date, and it's really helpful if law school and public policy and JSI or I know JSI's timetable, but law school and public policy, if you can suggest us that which are the dates are good for you guys, and timing especially, maybe because I got few mails from law school that they're really interested, but because of classes they were not able to make it. Yeah.
So it's going to be once a week?
No, we thought of it a fortnight. Fortnight, we thought of it will be fortnight because once a week you already have a lot of classes and a lot of assignments, so other events as well. So you can please do register, and also please do encourage your fellow batchmates. All right.